Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that's built to give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we are tackling a really universal problem. I think everyone feels this, the motivation crisis.
Mm.
That grinding internal resistance, when you know exactly what you should be doing, but you just cannot bring yourself to start.
Yeah, it's that feeling, that phrase, kanem his salushmakis timior.
I really don't want to work today.
Ex- It's just that gap between what you intend to do and what you actually execute.
Mhm.
And our source material draws this really striking contrast between us and, well, a machine.
Right. A sophisticated robot isn't superior because it's stronger or has, a bigger memory.
Not at all.
It's superior in this context because it follows the simple, unwavering chain: command, action, result.
Every single time.
No internal negotiation, no procrastination, just does it.
Which really highlights what an absolute mess the human internal mechanism can be. And our mission in this deep dive isn't to give you specific advice, do this, don't do that, but to really peel back the layers of that messy human loop so you can diagnose why your own engine stalls sometimes.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If a robot has command, action, result, what's our version?
It's a cycle, a ring, really.
And according to the psychology we've been looking at, it runs action, reward, motivation.
That is the core structure. Action creates the reward,
Yeah.
and that reward generates the motivation, which then it fuels the next action.
Which immediately clarifies the huge trap we all fall into, the misplaced motivation. We're always looking for the motivation before we take the action. We say, oh, I'm not inspired yet. Let me just scroll social media for a bit, watch a video.
And then I'll start.
Okay.
And that search for motivation first, well, by definition, it breaks the human loop.
How so?
Psychologically, motivation is the desire to start and sustain a behavior.
Yeah.
But in our natural cycle, it's the result of the action. It's the feedback, not the input.
Okay, so if I spend like 5 agonizing hours on a complex spreadsheet and I finally solve the problem, that feeling of success is the reward. And that reward is what creates the motivational energy for me to open the next horrible spreadsheet tomorrow.
Exactly. The success of the last action is the fuel for the next one. By demanding motivation first, we're basically asking for the fuel without ever earning the reward that creates it.
But wait a minute, I have to challenge it a little. What about tasks that are just inherently awful? I hate doing my taxes. There is zero immediate reward in filling out those forms. The reward is just not getting audited, which is a non-event. So how does the loop even start?
That's a crucial point. For those kinds of tasks, the system has to rely on, let's call them micro rewards.
Gotcha.
You have to artificially create that action reward feedback. So instead of the reward being the finished tax return, the reward has to be connected to the effort itself.
So like I tell myself, okay, just focus for 15 minutes and no phone. And then the reward is I get to listen to one song.
Exactly. Or even just crossing a single line item off your to-do list. You're rewarding the focus, not the outcome, just to trick your brain into starting the action phase.
Because if you don't start, you get nothing.
I get nothing. And understanding how we perceive that reward, that brings us to something fascinating in psychology, the power of control.
Right. And we have this famous study from 1998 with elementary school kids. And they gave them these puzzles that were designed to be really, really difficult.
Yeah, it's one of those studies that just completely changes how you think about praise. So after the kids worked really hard, the researchers gave them great scores, but they gave 2 totally different reasons for that success.
They were manipulating something called the locus of control.
That's it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
walk us through what happened, because the kids' behavior after this is what's really shocking.
So group 1 was praised for things outside their control. They were told, wow, you are so smart and so talented. An external sort of hereditary thing.
Okay.
Group 2 was praised for internal controllable factors. You must have worked really hard. You put in great effort.
Hold on. So praising kids for being smart actually made them less motivated. That flies in the face of, everything we think about parenting or managing people.
It really does, because when they later gave the kids a choice of new tasks, from easy to very difficult, Group 1, the smart and talented kids, they almost all chose the easier problems.
Wow.
And when they were asked if they enjoyed it, they were kind of lukewarm. They were trying to get an easy win to protect that identity of being smart.
So they were playing defense. They picked the easy thing because if they failed at a hard one, it would mean they weren't talented after all.
Precisely. Whereas group 2, the hardworking kids, they overwhelmingly chose the harder problems, and they reported being much happier and more motivated doing them.
So what does this tell us? It all comes down to this locus of control, this deep-seated belief about how much power we have over what happens in our lives.
Right. Group 1 developed an external locus of control. They started to believe success or failure was because of talent or luck or the environment. And if you think your performance is based on something you can't change,
Why bother trying harder?
why bother? You reduce your action, and the whole loop dies.
I see that all the time. You know, that classic door-to-door salesperson example. If they have a bad day, they blame external stuff. The economy's bad, the weather was awful.
People were in a bad mood.
Yeah,
And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
it does.
Because that external belief leads to less effort the next day, which guarantees a worse result. But the hardworking students, they developed an internal locus. They believed the reward came directly from their own controllable effort.
And that belief, even if it's a simplification, is basically the engine for motivation. It connects the outcome right back to the process.
Exactly.
So for you, listening right now, the key takeaway isn't just knowing this. It's about actively shifting your own narrative.
It's a kind of cognitive restructuring, self-motivational training. When you fail, you have to consciously try to connect it to something you could control.
So the salesperson, instead of the market is slow, it should be.
I didn't make enough cold calls, or I didn't test out a different neighborhood. You have to focus the reward and the failure on the process you can actually manage.
That makes so much sense behaviorally, but we're still fighting our own biology here, aren't we? So now that we have the psychology down, let's talk about the chemical reality. Because there's still that ancient voice in our heads telling us to just not do the thing.
That voice is all about energy conservation. I mean, for our ancestors, putting out constant high energy was a threat.
Right. Being tired could get you eaten, or you'd get sick, and that was a death sentence.
So that desire to resist effort is hardwired into us. It's why starting something new can feel like pulling teeth.
And the molecule that governs that whole calculation is this effort worth it, is dopamine. But I think a lot of people misunderstand what it actually does.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
We tend to think of dopamine as the pleasure molecule, like the reward itself.
Right.
But the research really shows that dopamine is the molecule of anticipation and seeking. It's the neurotransmitter of desire and drive.
So the dopamine spike happens when I anticipate the success, not when I actually get the reward.
Exactly. The spike happens before the action, during that seeking phase. And that's what motivates us to get over that hump between resting and actually doing something. If that system misfires, we stall.
Which is why that example of Parkinson's patients is so telling.
Oh, it's wild.
When they were prescribed these dopamine agonist drugs, they got this unnatural surge in seeking behavior, and many of them developed these intense gambling addictions.
Even with no prior history of it.
Right.
Because a gambling machine is a perfect sped-up simulation of that whole process. Action.
Yeah.
Put in money, pull the lever.
And all the lights and sounds create this massive anticipation.
And a dopamine surge during the act of pulling the lever before you even know the outcome. It just executes that action-reward loop so rapidly, it bypasses all the brain's normal cost-benefit analysis.
It is highly effective and highly addictive. Which brings us to a practical question. Since we need rewards, how often should we give them to ourselves?
The motivation paradox.
And the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic drive.
Right. Intrinsic motivation is when the joy comes just from doing the thing itself. You play a game because you love playing the game.
And extrinsic is when you do it for an external goal. You train at 5 a.m. because you want the Olympic medal or the big paycheck.
Exactly.
So the obvious thought is, well, why not have both? Wouldn't it be best to love the process and get a big reward?
You'd think so. But the research gives us a pretty big warning here. The over-justification effect.
Which is?
Adding an external reward can sometimes reduce or even just completely destroy your internal intrinsic drive.
The painting example explains this perfectly. I love to draw. I do it for fun. That's pure intrinsic motivation. Then I start selling prints. Now there's an external reward, money.
And at first that feels great, but as the sales grow, you eventually find yourself drawing just to keep up with commissions. The fun is gone.
You're not painting because you want to anymore.
You're painting because you have to. The extrinsic reward has basically hijacked and killed the internal joy.
So the lesson isn't don't get paid. It's that you have to be really careful about balancing these things.
That's right. If you focus only on the huge extrinsic reward at the very end, the bonus, the contract, the actual day-to-day effort can become unbearable. You have to find joy in the process itself.
Okay, so that brings us back to some actionable self-coaching. What are the two core strategies you need to be using to reset your own loop?
First is that cognitive restructuring. You have to be hyper-aware of your locus of control. Practice connecting outcomes to things you can control, your effort, your strategy, not just talent or luck.
Reward the effort, not just the outcome.
Right. And second, you have to reduce the activation energy. Make it easier to start the action phase. If your brain calculates the cost of starting as too high, you'll never get that dopamine spike you need.
You'll just procrastinate.
Exactly. And speaking of reducing that friction, the creator of our source material pointed to a great example of this principle. The web series, Sıfırdan İticaret, or E-commerce from zero.
And they framed the series as more than just a guide. It was a lesson in overcoming those initial barriers.
They did, because starting an e-commerce business is full of friction, right? Product selection, payment systems, technical stuff. The series uses platforms like Ika's to show how you can reduce that initial complexity.
So how does that system embody these motivation principles?
Well, by removing the technical roadblocks that cause resistance. For instance, the system lets you upload unlimited products without worrying about bandwidth costs. That eliminates the fear of, unexpected fees as you scale up.
So it lowers the perceived cost.
It does, and more importantly, it simplifies the most intimidating steps, like applying for payment infrastructure directly through the platform, which removes all the friction of dealing with old-school banks.
So the tools make the action phase less daunting for someone who's new to all this? They lower the energy cost with things like drag-and-drop themes and pre-negotiated shipping discounts?
It just makes the whole thing less scary to start. Which means you don't need a huge amount of motivation to get going, make it easier to finally kickstart that action reward loop and get the success you need to keep going.
We started this whole deep dive by contrasting our messy, resistant human loop with the robot's perfect, simple execution.
Yeah.
And that resistance is ultimately based on an evolutionary need to save energy, and it's powered by this easily manipulated dopamine system.
Our loop is definitely not simple. But that human ability to create motivation from struggle is exactly what makes us. Well, us.
Right.
We can attach rewards to intangible things. It's why we have poetry and songs. They motivate us through things that aren't material, like just a kind word, or that feeling of pride for finishing something hard.
It's the manufactured meaning that keeps us going.
Yeah.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to think about. If human motivation is so reliant on this internal dopamine-fueled reward system, one that is, as we've seen, so easily manipulated, how might future intelligent robots who operate perfectly on command-action result eventually start creating their own values and motives?
They might achieve perfect efficiency, sure, but will they ever develop their own version of intangible rewards, their own poetry, to motivate something beyond just completing a task? That messy, complex ability to create motivation from nothing but effort, that's still uniquely human.
That is definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us today.